All right, everybody, welcome. We have another fun TLN webinar going on today. And today we're talking with Beth Volinsky and Rachel Cannon here from the Interfaith Leadership Council of Metropolitan Detroit. They're going to be talking about their program, Bridging to Belonging, and I'll let them take it away from here.
All right. Hi, good morning. I'm so glad you're here on this beautiful, kind of false fall day. I know that I'm super excited to head outside a little bit later today and just really enjoy the weather. But we're also very excited to be here this morning to present our Bridging to Belonging program to the Library Network. We've been waiting to do this for a little while, so we're so glad that you can join us. So we're going to have a few spots that are dedicated for questions as we go through the presentation. So if you have questions, we'll have some time for that. But if you have something that's super pressing that you would like to ask in the middle of the presentation, don't hesitate. You can raise your hand or you can put it in the chat, and we'll stop what we're talking about and answer your questions. So we want to make sure that we answer everything that you have questions about as we go along. As DJ said, my name is Beth Volinsky with the Interfaith Leadership Council, and I've been doing work around the Bridging to Belonging program for about 2 years now. And then I'll let Rachel introduce herself. She's my co-presenter today.
Yes, I'm Rachel Cannon. I'm volunteer co-chair with the IFLC. My background is as an organizational psychologist and consultant. So I'm the lead designer for the program and just helping every group and organization figure out how they best use this in their organization and community. So.
All right, perfect. So we want to start the slides. I'll move into okay. Okay, so you're probably wondering when you signed up to, be a part of this workshop, what exactly do we mean by bridging to belonging? And, how does my work in the public library setting connect to these two terms? So we're going to talk a little bit about that in the next hour and why these two things are actually super important. Okay, so we're going to break the hour into two different parts. The first part, we're going to talk about what does science tell us about bridging to belonging. It has been very important to us that we design a program that will help us understand how to create change and bring people together. So we've been super diligent about making sure that we include the work of individuals in the fields of neuroscience and positive and social psychology, such as John Powell, the Arbinger Institute, Chad Ford, Brene Brown, and others. We're going to talk also about what community and belonging looks and feels like. And lastly, and what the science tells us about that. And lastly, we're going to go over a little bit of our program model, the Bridging to Belonging program model. In the second part of the hour here, we're going to go over the ground rules that we use within our program and why we find that they're very important. And then we're going to have a little bit of time for you to try out a little bit of what we do within the program model, just to get a little bit of a sense of what happens during our discussion series, our typical discussion series. And then Rachel's going to talk a little bit about how you can get started cultivating belonging in your communities. There's many different paths that this journey could take and different ways that it could look. So she's going to talk to you a little bit about that at the end. And then we'll have time for questions too at the end. Okay, so what does belonging look and feel like? So how does it feel to truly connect with somebody else? Let's take a moment and have a little bit of a discussion about, what does that look and feel like for you? If you want to just share out, or you could put it in the chat.
Yeah, if you throw anything in the chat, I'll be happy to read it.
Does anyone have any thoughts? It could be different from what's listed here. If not, we have some examples that are already here. Obviously, it means to some people, I can ask for help. It means I am heard by others in my community. It means I have influence in my community, that I can, create some change within my community. Other people listen to me. It means also that I am supported in my ideas and the things that I care about. All these things are very important for true connection and true belonging. And these things can feel different for everyone. Some people will have, certain things that are important to them, and other people will have different things that are important to them. So it truly is, unique to the individual.
I'm seeing a few different things in the chat. So I'm seeing belonging for us is making sure everyone feels represented,
Mhm.
being heard as an individual, also learning patrons' names or just learning people's names in general. Also, I think we have a lot of stereotypes these days, and once you are tagged as being this or that, people stop listening. Connecting means going beyond those stereotypes.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I agree with all of those. And we are going to talk about some of those things as we go a little bit further on in our presentation today, but I definitely agree with all of those examples. So we're going to take a minute because we noted that a fundamental part of belonging is being seen and heard. So we're going to take a minute and introduce ourselves to each other. Rachel and I obviously have already done that, but we're going to have you guys introduce yourselves. So if you could take a moment and share your name, the library that you're representing, and what brought you here to the webinar today, that would be wonderful. We could start. We'll just go down the list here from what I can see here, anyways, with Jordan from Ferndale.
Hey, my name's Jordan. I'm the director of Ferndale Area District Library. I had flagged this webinar when it first came out, but wasn't sure what my day would look like, and my day cleared up miraculously. And then I saw DJ's reminder email, so here I am.
Great, great. That's wonderful. Brenda from Highland.
Hi, yeah, I saw this kind of late too, and glad I was able to make it, but I guess my comment about stereotypes was what brought me here, because we should be able to speak up. We should be able to be flagged for being this or that, or this, that, or that group, but still have pleasant conversations.
Mm-hmm. Great. That's wonderful. So for some reason, I'm not seeing everybody here. I can look at the list here though. How about Brandy from Brandy Swinehart?
She might not be there. I know Kensley is here on video. Kensley, you want to go next?
Sure.
Oh, Brady doesn't have a microphone. That's why.
Okay. No worries. No worries.
So I'm just kind of trying to make some connections and do some classes, and belonging is very important with all, and learn a little more.
Perfect. Perfect. Let's see. Petra. Like I said, I can't see everybody for some reason, but I can see the list here.
Oh, hi, I'm Petra. I'm from TLN, and I wanted to check this out and see, what to be more mindful of how to make people feel like they belong is very important. I mean, most people want a feeling of belonging. So I'm here to learn, hopefully learn how we can be better at that.
Agreed. I agree. That is something that everybody wants to have, isn't it?
Yes.
Absolutely. We also have, I see C.S. Smith.
She typed in the chat.
Typed in the chat. Okay, don't have a microphone. Okay, well, welcome anyways. We're happy you're here. And we have a couple of folks
Hey,
also
Beth.
oh, sorry.
Beth, we can just read what she wrote, though. She did give some background. So Carolyn Smith from Dearborn Heights South. She was drawn to the webinar to help understand our kids a little more from the local school and figure out how to better interact with them. They've been butting heads lately.
Okay, perfect. All right, and then we also have a couple of folks from the IFLC also with us today. Raman, perhaps you want to introduce yourself if you're there?
Yep, I'm here. Hi, this is Raman Singh. I'm the Executive Director of the InterFaith Leadership Council. Happy to be here. Thanks.
And we should also have Greg Geiger. Greg, if you're there.
You're on mute.
Thank you. Yes, so I'm also leader of the InterFaith Leadership Council and have been involved with it from the very beginning. So pleased to be here, and we're very excited about this effort at community building and the results it's had so far. Thank you.
All right. Did we get everybody? There's no one that I missed, right? I was looking at the list here. I think we've got everyone. All right. Okay, so we're going to have a little bit of time later on to chat a little bit more in the hour. But so right now we're going to flip to the next slide, and we'll talk a little bit about what is important to understand about communities. And so the people that you just introduced yourself to, the people that are here in the chat or here in the webinar today, and all the people in your everyday lives are all part of many different communities. And we've noticed that communities that work well usually share similar properties. And that definitely starts with that people are at the center of all communities. They build trust, belonging, safety, and care for each other. They allow themselves to be influenced by each other. They meet needs together, and they create shared experience together. And we all belong to multiple communities. You can probably think of several right off the top of your head that you might belong to. And maybe it includes your school community or your kids' school communities, your work communities, maybe the library community as a whole, faith communities, or even just the community in your neighborhood. But we don't know about all these different communities that a person belongs to when we first meet them. So we usually seek to find out a little bit more about them, and we want to know, where the people that we run into, where do they belong? What communities do they belong to? So what does the science tell us about bridging to belonging? So when we think about belonging, it is maybe first important to understand what the opposite of belonging is. And that usually could be, narrowed down to othering. But what does it mean to other somebody? And usually you might think that it's just acts of hate. And in extreme cases, we know that definitely can be true. But othering is simply usually just flattening someone's identity and not seeing them in their full complexity. So you're really just seeing them as one aspect of who they are. And this is something that we all do. I think it's a human thing to do. We run into so many people throughout our day. The cashier at the store, the teller at the bank, the person who delivers the mail. And when you interact with them, you might not be thinking about anything more than just that one aspect of who they are, even though there's so much more to them. And this, again, this is something we all do. We all like to categorize things. It helps us to make sense of what's going on in our lives. So again, it's something that we all do. But what happens, what could happen if we go a little bit deeper in our interactions?
The good news.
So we're going to see right now a clip of John Powell. He is the head of the Othering and Belonging Institute at UC Berkeley. And he's a key influence and a friend of our program. And he's going to talk a little bit about, or he's going to describe a little bit about othering.
Is we have many parts of our identity. We may be a church member, but we also may be a businesswoman, a man. We may be a parent. We may be an avid jogger. We may be vegetarian. We may be depressed. We may be happy. We may be a traveler. And so, and that's the good thing, right? So we have all these identities. And when we meet someone, when we think of them as other, we flatten their identity. That's a white person. That's all I see. I don't see other parts of their being. One of the phenomena of othering people is that we flatten them. We don't see them in their complexity. And so part of bridging is actually giving us a chance to see the person in the complexity. In that complexity, there's almost always something that happens where we can connect.
Yeah. So what I think is really important is how he talks about there's always something to connect to. And when you think about the complexity and all the richness that exists within each person that we meet, and when you think about all the communities to which each person belongs, there's almost always something that we can find that will connect us, even someone that we've never met before and who we think we have nothing in common with. So what is belonging? So we've talked about what othering is. So let's talk about now what belonging actually means. And very simply, it just means being seen, being heard, and being valued. It means having a meaningful voice in the community and being supported as well. And this is more than just being present together. So you can be at work with a group of other coworkers. Perhaps it's a really diverse group of individuals and voices. And you are present together in a common space, but you may not still want to hear what the other people have to say, or you might not be willing to support them. So it is possible to be together in the same place and still feel alone because there is a lack of connection. And we've all felt this way sometimes. And we also know that having a sense of belonging is a huge protective factor for our mental health. It's very important for us, and it gives us a sense of meaning and happiness. So we're going to take a second to talk about what helps you feel seen, heard, and valued, and what behaviors in others help you feel seen, heard, and valued. And again, we can just chat, unmute, raise your hand, or you can put it actually in the chat. And we'll take a couple minutes here and talk about it.
I think that like asking questions about what people are saying helps a lot, like helping people feel heard, and like kind of going back to like those questions, and I guess just active listening in general to people around you, I think helps with feeling heard and seen and valued.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
This is kind of interesting because I know what I do to help people feel valued or heard or seen. What I'm thinking about for myself, I don't know.
What do you do? If
I
you'd
like
like
to,
to share.
like I said, for patrons specifically, I like to know people's names. And one of my favorite parts about being a public librarian is getting to know people, getting to know families, watching kids grow up, feeling like, you're almost sort of, I don't want to, I use the word even though I'm reluctant to use it, like almost like you're like kind of building a family or something with this community.
Mhm.
But I like to acknowledge people's work, like my employees, like just to a constant acknowledgement of the things that they're doing and
Mhm.
making sure that they're recognized for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that Jordan raised an important point. I think there's a lot of people who don't know what they need to feel belonging, right? They just know that they don't feel it. And so one of those challenges is, how do we get to know them, and how do we see them in a way where we can just try different things, right? Where they can recognize that when it does happen. So part of that is looking into our own stories to say, how do we feel belonging? When did I feel it? And how did I feel it? But then also helping others look into their stories, right? And like Kensley said, being curious, asking them about their experiences, right? And it's through those stories that identification of what I need can often come out, because we don't always just know in a bulleted list of this is what I need, right? You think about any relationship, it's common in marriage and other things where you're like, what do you need? I don't know. I just need something, right? And we find that happening with belonging as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. All right. Well, if nobody else has any other ideas, we'll talk about what we found about what the opposite of othering is. Okay. So when we do the work of building belonging, we often will only try to see how we are the same with other people. And this, again, is the natural human tendency. But belonging is not about erasing differences and just seeing the sameness. In fact, sometimes most of the most powerful othering happens when we base all of our belonging on conformity or being the same. And again, this can be very natural. It's powerful to find similarities among other people. I know that's happened to me so many times when you find something that you have in common with somebody. But if our focus is entirely on finding sameness, it will actually drive those who feel different that much further away. And so when we try to create a space of belonging, we want to have it allow us to see and understand and appreciate the differences that we see in other people, as well as what we have in common. And this allows us to co-create new paths and ways with our differences, not in spite of them. And it allows for true innovation by appreciating the strengths that each person brings to the table. And research has shown that the presence of diversity itself does not create innovation if all the voices aren't included. It is the inclusion of all the voices and the values and the thoughts that is true co-creation. So we have another quick clip of John Powell.
So one
and he's going to talk a little bit about co-creation.
story is that the world is changing and you should be afraid. There are people who don't look like us, who don't talk like us, who don't eat like us, who don't dress like us, who worship God differently than us if they worship God at all. And in that story is that they are a threat to who we are. That's breaking. There's another story, which said, yes, the world is changing. We're becoming more diverse, but it's also full of riches. It's full of learning, full of mystery, it's an opportunity to invite a new future. And that future is not our future or their future. It's all of our futures. And we co-create that future together. That's called bridging. So one extreme you have bridging, which basically says we can tell a new story. We can augment that story. We can tell a story together where we live together and sometimes worship together, go to school together. And we don't become each other, but we can appreciate each other. The other story is that no, the other is a threat.
Okay. So I love how John Powell talks about how there are competing stories in the world, and that the differences can either break us or be a source of, power for us. So as we go along, just take a minute to think about yourself and how you've heard the stories in the world around you, and how you sort of keep those in your head as you approach others. Because how we listen and take in these different stories from others can have a big impact on how what our mindset is and how we influence and influence how we approach other people. So you probably have some questions. I know we've had some time to talk about some different things. We want to make sure, again, that we get to all of your questions. So if you have anything right now about bridging or belonging, take a minute and write down what you're thinking about. We'll take a second here so you can write. We want to make sure we get to all your questions, and we don't want you to forget anything. So just take a moment and write down anything that you have.
These are questions for yourself personally, in your role in the libraries, any of those contexts, right? Any questions about how we build belonging.
Okay, so, and you can keep writing, obviously, if you have questions, if you still have something that you want to write down, keep writing. We're going to talk, since we have limited time, we're going to move on and talk about bridging now. So we've talked about belonging. So now we want to find out, what is bridging? And very simply, bridging is the process that we use to build belonging. And we found that there are some pretty common obstacles to building bridges that most of us experience. One of those being the perceived polarization that we see in the world today, especially with social media. There's a lot of heavy perceived polarization of viewpoints. But the interesting thing is that this perception of polarization is actually so much greater than what the actual polarization is. So if we flip to the next slide, we can see, for example, if we look at, it's divided here into Republicans and Democrats. So if we look at how they estimate each other's viewpoints on different topics, and then we can see how big the gap is between that and how they actually feel. So it is actually very significant, and it's not something that we always think about. And it's not just politics. If you consider that 11% of surveyed Americans have never traveled outside the state they were born, 54% of those surveyed have visited 10 states or fewer, 40% have never left the country. And then we also still have a whopping 85% of those surveyed who would like to experience new things. So it's not just in politics that we see this. And then in recent years, most of the information we form our opinions on and act on is information that's solely based from social media. And, those types of sources, which we know has become much less than objective. And we also know that there's a huge amount of diversity in our communities, and that can be a power that we unlock moving forward if we engage with individuals and move past our perception of what the issues are. If we work at building community, if we work on changing both perception and reality, it gives people a sense that they are seen, heard, and valued, and that they can contribute with their unique strengths to the community, and that they can also reach out to the community for help. So one of the other, if we flip back, one of the other obstacles that we have noted is that we often have a tendency to view other people as the problem. And because we have such a gap in perception about polarization, this is something that is a common thing. And we sort of hear this all the time. We hear people say, you know, what are you going to do about those others who are the problem? And it's common to engage in a conversation or interaction and become frustrated over our perceived polarizations and ultimately just say, you know, that person is the issue. And we often think this, you know, in conversations that we might have or interactions that we might have with somebody, we think to ourselves, you know, if that person would only just, you know, see things my way or behave a little differently, I would be able to react better or connect better with him or her. I have this conversation with my kids all the time. They're constantly waiting for their sibling to change his behavior before they change theirs. So it's something that we constantly talk about. And again, this is natural. But the reality is that building belonging, building that space of belonging, is really about changing how we approach others instead of how they approach us. And it's about examining our own behaviors and our own mindset. And lastly, we often choose safety behaviors over growing. Again, as with everything else, this is normal. It's human. We all want to be comfortable. We want to feel safe. And usually if something feels a little bit uncomfortable, we start to feel like maybe it's a threat and something that we need to stay away from. So we might not engage in conversation with someone who we disagree with because it's scary. The conflict is scary. We might not reach out to someone who's different because we hear stories of being mistreated. We might feel a burden of stereotypes that others might have of us. We might struggle to connect, things like that. But ultimately, we should understand that we need to be uncomfortable first, and be okay with being uncomfortable in order to grow. It's a very important thing. So Chad Ford, if we flip to the next slide, works as a conflict mediator in the Middle East. And he's going to talk a little bit about what he has learned in his work and why he still has hope for our progress amid polarization.
Just a second here.
People begin seeing the other side as objects, not people. They don't believe that those people have the same needs, wants, and desires as they do. Number two, people believe that the solution to this problem is outside-inside transformation. In other words, my problem goes away when the other person changes. We can imagine what's frustrating about that. The other person believes the same way. And so people actually lose their ability to collaboratively problem solve together. They become frustrated because they can't solve even basic problems of living together, and they blame the other side. People begin seeing the other side as objects, not people. They don't believe that those people have the same needs, wants, and desires as they do. Number two, people believe that the solution to this problem is outside-inside transformation. In other words, my problem goes away when the other person changes. We can imagine what's frustrating about that. The other person believes the same way. And so people actually lose their ability to collaboratively problem solve together. They become frustrated because they can't solve even basic problems of living together, and they blame the other side. She has seen too much conflict. She is frustrated. She hates Israelis, and she is convinced that they are the enemies. She joins a basketball program not because she wants to play with Israelis, because she wants to beat them on the basketball court. And she's ripe for the sort of political polarization that's going to ultimately convince her that the only solution to this problem is to eliminate the people who are the problem. Luckily, Doha took a different path than many, many other young people. 2 years into her work with Peace Players, she and I were together in Tel Aviv for a basketball tournament at Peace Players. We were going to have this game between Israelis and Palestinian girls. We'd rented out all these courts in the park, but the court that we were going to play on had a bunch of Israeli men playing pickup basketball. When they saw the Palestinians and they saw the girls wanting to play basketball, they just refused to vacate the court. They could care less that we had rented the court. They just said no. She has seen too. I began marching over to those men to give them a piece of my mind. I was disgusted at the racist and sexist remarks that they were making towards those children. But luckily, Doha beat me to the punch. Before I could get to them, there was Doha sticking her hand out and saying in Hebrew, "Thank you for allowing us to use your court today. You might see that we're just learning basketball. It can be really frustrating to watch. Thank you for giving us a chance." I was stunned. The men didn't know how to react at first, but then slowly, one by one, their hands came out, and they began shaking Doha's hands. By approaching her enemies with respect and appreciation, Doha had taught us all a master class in dangerous love. She would say later, "What is going on in our countries affects our lives in a big way, but it does not affect how we feel about each other." I began marching over.
Sorry, I was on mute there. Yeah, so Chad Ford's hope here, as he explains it, lies in the dangerous love that he has and in seeing other people as people and moving beyond our perceptions to reach out to the other side and really see and know each other. And again, he's not saying that there will never be any problems, because obviously there still will be, but it really is just about seeing that everyone around us is a person in their complexity and in all of their humanity. If our hope lies in bridging our differences, then what are the keys to success that we have found? So first, we found that one thing that's important is recognizing our common humanity, realizing that no matter how different you think you might be from someone else or how different your viewpoints might be on any given issue, you can still find something to learn from them. And that's super important. What can you learn from them? It may just be understanding them, where they came from, what their story is, and how did they come to view the world in the way that they do. So it's all about asking questions. What is their story, and thinking about, what brought them to where they are today. Another thing is building a bridge is also about understanding and not persuading. If you go up to somebody to engage in conversation and then spend all of your time trying to persuade them about something or about how you feel about an issue, what typically happens? You find that they will get defensive with you, and they will not want to talk, and there will be no back and forth. It will just be you trying to be persuasive. So building a bridge is, again, it's not also about giving up what you believe and only listening to what they're saying. It is about trying to understand where we each come from and how we got there. So it's not about persuading them about what you think, and it's not about listening to what they're saying and automatically agreeing with them. And it's understanding how we come to our values through our lived experiences. And we don't we don't typically just decide to do things because they sound like a great idea. I mean, sometimes we do, but most often we have reasoning and background behind our choices. And sometimes people still do things that might not be the best choice. We all do this. And this is why humility is so important, and curiosity is so important, because we need to try to recognize that we all have wonderful moments, great moments, best moments, and we also all have worse moments. So it's all about that balance. And then, as Chad Ford described, bridges result from inner work as well as outer action. Thinking back to those conversations I often have with my kids, it really matters the mindset that you have when you approach another person. This will have a significant impact on your interaction and whether or not you're able to build a bridge. One of our greatest challenges to building bridges is to think about the voices that may not be present, but that should be present. And this is something that I know to be valuable in a library setting, because I know there's a large desire to include everyone and to create equal access and a voice for everyone. And again, that doesn't mean that we're going to agree with everybody that we meet, and it doesn't mean that we're going to feel the same or be the same as everyone we meet. But it just means that we do need all voices to create that sustainable bridge. And knowing that we need all the voices helps us to understand that all these small shifts that we make in the way we approach other people can bring about big changes in our communities and in our relationships and in our lives. Co-creating is about listening and understanding all voices and saying, how can we move together? How can we move forward on this journey together? Okay, we have one
So how
last.
do you deal with people who
We have one last John Powell clip, and he talks about how people come together in this common work.
So one story is that, so how do you deal with people who have different practices, different sacred texts? Well, one of the ways you deal with it is you bring people together among some common project, and so that they can hear each other's stories, so that they can participate in each other's lives. And your honoree has always reflected that. So a deep friendship happens when you come together and do common work. Unfortunately, we don't have a chance to come together enough.
Yeah, so, it's human, again, to not want all voices to be present, because sometimes it just feels easier to not have to listen to other people. It feels easier to not have to try to understand. It feels easier not to include the people who are absent. But the challenge is to finding that sustainable change is to look for all the voices that aren't present and to understand and include them. So as John Powell said, we come to really know each other as we work to co-create a future together. So we're not just increasing diversity alone, because remember, diversity alone doesn't create innovation, but we're learning to co-create a future together. Diversity and inclusion are often used interchangeably, but diversity itself is about the presence of diverse viewpoints and experiences, while inclusion is about how we treat a group of individuals, hopefully fairly, respectfully, providing equal access, a voice, and the ability to contribute. And when we focus on both, and the people that are not in the room, present in the room, we know that we'll feel seen, heard, respected, and understood. And when we go a little bit further to creating belonging and value people as they are, that sense of belonging activates kind of the same reward systems in our brain as extrinsic motivating factors such as money. And a sense of belonging often creates performance and motivation more than those other factors. So those we interact with will understand that they can contribute their unique strengths to the community, and also that they can reach out to their community for help. This is a very important part. So we'll talk a little bit about our program. All of the science that we just talked about and learned about impacted greatly how we designed the Bridging to Belonging program model. As I mentioned earlier, our program intentionally relied heavily on the understanding and incorporating the work of other scholars in these fields. And it's not about fixing all the issues. We know that won't happen. We know that whatever problems our participants have coming into our sessions with each other or with others will not magically be solved by the end of the program. But the Bridging to Belonging program aims to be the foundation of learning and practicing building these bridges of belonging. So it's the base for it, not the total solution. We aim to equip our participants to continue to build on that foundation with others. And this is the ripple effect that we talked about, where we increase the number of individuals who've learned and experienced a space of belonging and feel competent to continue to learn and practice building those spaces of belonging. So we found that a few key principles are very important when doing our program. One is that division can be healed by seeing others as a person and not just objects in our way. We've all had experience with this, when we're rushing and we really just want to get something accomplished. Others just seem like they're barriers to our end goal, such as being in traffic and trying to get to an appointment. But we found that if we can stop and see others in their complexity as humans, as someone to learn from, we are more likely to have our divisions healed. Two, each individual holds values that are worthwhile. This can be tough sometimes because we will often meet people that we have a difficult time understanding. We can't figure out why they think the way they do or why they might act the way they do. But if we try to understand the values that led them or that lead them to act and behave as they are, it will help us to learn how to solve problems together. Three, building trust through truly hearing and appreciating each other. And this is not just about hearing somebody else and picking apart what they have to say and telling them, why what they're saying might not be correct. This again happens all the time, or we might be thinking it if we're not saying it. This is a human thing to do. And, that usually because we would like people to understand and agree with us. But it's really about hearing other people's stories and learning to appreciate and learn from what they're telling us. And then lastly, having co-creation on some issue where there are shared values. And this can definitely lead to us doing things a little bit differently and being truly innovative in our solutions. So the Bridging to Belonging program, again, as I said, is the foundation of the solutions that we're seeking in our community and for the change that we're hoping to create within our community and, about any of the issues that are important to us. And it all starts with Bridging to Belonging. We have developed a program that generally is centered around an 8-week model. And we usually have about 4 small group discussion sessions. We'll put together groups of about 6 to 8 diverse people. We try to make the groups as diverse as possible. And then there's a little bit of prep work before each discussion to help the participants feel prepared and to think through the topics that we're going to discuss. It starts with an orientation, which will go over the ground rules and all of the different parts of the program. The first discussion is centered around storytelling, and it talks about what brings the participants there and why are they in the room to do the work and why they feel it's important to them. And in that discussion, we practice listening, intentional listening, and also expressing appreciation for what the people in the room are saying. The second discussion centers around values. And this is not something that many of us may spend a whole lot of time thinking about, what our core values are, what really drives us to live our lives, and what guides our decisions. I know that's not something I spent a whole lot of time thinking about before the program, but it is very important. So the second discussion focuses on having these conversations, thinking about it ourselves, and then talking about it as a group. And again, practicing that intentional listening and expressing appreciation. And the final discussion talks about co-creation. So this is kind of discovering and unlocking the values that we all share. The people in the group will talk about, what might be similar about their values, how that they're connected in that way. And then they're going to discuss how they want to continue to work together going forward, whether they want to, focus on a project, whether they just want to continue to deepen their relationship, or continue learning together. And the decisions there are going to be based on the people in the group solely. So it's going to be based on who they are, what they value, and what's important to them, and what issues they might want to tackle. And this is a practice. It's something that we're trying to help the individuals build into their lives on a daily basis going forward. And some of the groups may also decide to do a fifth session, and that would focus on sponsoring community change. And that's something that would happen with our partner, Vitality Source, which Rachel heads up. So we found that we have several ground rules that are important for our, that are important key parts of the program. And we go over these in depth during the orientation and also during the pre-planning for the sessions. But here's a quick summary. And if you want to take a moment to look through the ground rules and see what stands out to you and why any of these matter. Is there one maybe that resonates with you? Do you have experience with doing one of these? And then as you're looking at them, thinking about how we can usually be more conscious of some than we are of others, and it also can depend on the day whether or not we're more we paid more attention to one or the other. So just take a moment and take a look at what we have listed here. Does anyone have one that they think resonates with them, or that maybe they feel like they're really good at focusing on during a conversation? Or maybe one that you're not so good at? I know there's several here that I know I'm not very good at when I have conversations with others. I think, go ahead.
I think that you touched on this earlier, but I do like that at the end, how it says, belonging does not erase differences. And we often do kind of go at it and trying to change somebody's mind. And those differences will always be there. It's just trying to, through that process, become comfortable with them and appreciate one another. So I like that part.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love that, Brenda, because it's so important. You think about small interactions you have, you meet someone, and it's like you're looking for things that you have in common. And if you don't find anything, you're like, oh, where do we go from here? right? And the point is that you don't have to be the same, right? So how do we shift our behaviors to where we appreciate and learn from each other and the things that are different rather than just looking for what we have in common? Commonality is still important, right? But it's not just based on that.
Yep.
This is Petra joining in. I do, all those points are very important, but I do like the wrap up about belong does not erase differences also, because we're basically saying like we can sit and we can do this, we can act this as an exercise. But once it's done, we don't just check the box. We have to like remember these important things about Jody or whatever it is, that person, oh, they're good at this, or hey, we got this new book, maybe that person coming in, I could say, hey, we just got this in, or whatever it is, those just and I think that it really you have to be open and listen, which is so easy because a lot of these things are just reminders, right? And a lot of these are reminders, hey, we're human, the other person's human, whatever, but we get caught up in the commonality. Like you said, it's just human nature. And there's that, it is important, I think, to know what we're common at, the common things, but also because we have common struggles, we have common, we're human. And then the things that our differences is how we can get, everybody can show their strengths, etc. So it's a really good reminder, and I like it because it takes a village, Can't do it all.
Exactly. And that's why we talk about also this being a practice, because it's something that we're not all good at every single day. We're not, very few of us are good at doing all of these things all the time. So it's something that you have to practice every day and sort of be intentional about thinking about each one of these things when you approach others.
And Petra, I liked what you said. You brought up that we do have commonalities, right? But often what we focus on is the surface level stuff. And so one of the things that we learn and teach in the program is how do we get underneath the things that we see, right? Just the surface level things to what values people have and what drives people's behavior, right? Because we all may even have the same values, but we act those values out differently, right? My reason for doing something is different than your reason. And so we try to get to that level of values so that we can then say, what values do we share? And how do we act together on those values? Because that's a much more connecting point rather than just surface level behaviors.
Right, to say like, there is always going to be all these competing priorities and, agendas and whatever, but like, let's focus, right? And think about it. I like it. It's interesting that there's this whole program where everybody sits down and shares their story. That's cute. I love stories, everybody's stories. DJ knows.
Yes, very much so. Yes, we all have stories over here at Tillen. So,
all right. Well, I'm going to let Rachel take over for the second part of the presentation today, and she'll talk a little bit about the experience, and then how you can become involved as a library employees.
So the real question is, how do we get started, right? You in your role at libraries, there's a lot of different needs in different communities, right? So there's two main paths in the way that we can use this program. One is that you're really focused on building a cohort of bridge builders. Like we said, a lot of the community impact can be the ripple effect as individuals begin to act differently and create spaces of belonging within their circles and the people that they meet, right? And so that path is really just forming these small groups within your community, and the library is acting as a host, as a sponsor, right? And saying, we want to help people to learn these skills and have this experiential learning within the community. And so you would help connect to organizations, places within the community to invite people to be part of these small group programs, right? And so that can be specific to a general invitation, or it could be a general invitation, or it could be specific to bridges that need to be built within your community, right? Either one, that program can take either path. The other path is learning and practicing spaces of belonging as a library. You're already a community hub, right? And that looks a little bit different in each community, but this is where you partner with us and we can talk about what is the right way for you to learn to create these spaces of belonging. That can look like having community workshops that are like this, where people begin to experience it and learn a little bit about how they can be bridge builders. It can be one-time partner events. It can be providing learning opportunities to where you encourage people to learn about those who might be different than them, right? And we can work together on how do we integrate this into the programming that you already do, right? It doesn't have to be a whole new thing because we all know that we all have lots of things to do already. So that path is really as a partner in saying, how do we engage the library and the community in creating a space of belonging? And what's the right way to do that for your library? When we talk about one-time partner events, that's one of the lowest lift things that we can do. And these are some of the things that we have done in the past. We have virtual events. So like there's a National Week of Conversation that happens in April, and there's national events and resources, things like film screenings, things like, there was a detox that was online, the second thing here, where people signed up for emails or for texts and they got ideas and things to think about of how do they detox from polarization. We did a movie screening, and we're doing another one coming up here in West Bloomfield Library. The in-person events can be things that the IFLC already does or that are going on in the community, like faith community tours. We have a World Sabbath event. We also have film screenings. We will have a living room conversation event that coming up this fall, where it's politics and personal relationships, right? How do you get through that awkward thing? So we have a variety of ongoing events. We also have connections to national and local partners that we can help connect you to things that might be specific needs for your library in terms of giving learning opportunities for your community. So those are the ongoing events. So when we talk about this, it's really kind of saying what path might be the right one for your library. And then we have a conversation about what that looks like, how that works for you. If you do get to the point, for example, in Farmington Hills, there were specific issues around racial tensions. And so we said we want to do specific projects there, and we can go further and say in coaching, and that's what my business does a little bit more of. In coaching, how do we actually solve some of these problems, deal with conflicts, and co-create change within a community? Right now, that's kind of the last part, right? You built the foundation and now we actually apply and solve a specific problem. So not everybody's going to get there, and that's okay, right? With either of these paths, there's going to be significant change both for individuals and for the community in learning how to build spaces of belonging. So it really is pretty flexible. When we talk about what that looks like, we do have program pricing simply because we have to pay staff that are carrying it out, right? These are flexible. So we can talk about what's available, what kind of funding you do have, and what we can get from other donors. But typically the standard fees for the workshop are $500. The 8-week program is $3,500. The 8-week program plus a year of moderated ongoing engagement. So we connect you to all these engagement events and let your participants know about them, would be $5,000. We can also do concentrated like 3-day workshops plus that year. If that's something that works, that's a little bit more. It basically is, as we have more groups happening at once, we have to pay for more moderators, right? So that's the increasing cost there. So like I said, we can talk about what makes sense for the library that you are with, how we can help the community. It also doesn't have to be just for the library. If you want to bring in other community partners, we've worked with that as well. So we're working with Plymouth Library right now, going through their strategic planning process and helping them to identify who might be the right partners and what's the best way for them to move forward. So they started with community workshop. They started with a one group that included people in the community and people within their staff, just to learn the program and gain the skills. And now we're talking about how do we take it further for them to be a community hub. So there's a variety of paths it can take. It really is very customizable. So it's just worth that conversation. So I know we are at time or a little bit past time. So I wanted to say, what questions do you have that haven't been answered? DJ, if you know there are questions that people will have as they watch the recording or get this as well, just let me know.
Just contact information for sure we'll have for you. And then we'll have the video, you'll send us that.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
The slides will be on the video. A separate slide file or no?
Yeah, if you're interested in the slide file, we can share a PDF version of that. So we'll give that to DJ, and we'll also have kind of the flyer that shows the 2 paths that you can take, right? That has the contact information on it. So we
Okay.
can send that to him.
That would be good.
And yep, and DJ has our contact information too. If you have specific questions for me or for Beth, you feel free to contact one of us as well.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. DJ, any other questions that come up for you that you think people have?
I don't think so. This is well informative for sure.
Yep. So I know it's a challenge to think about, you know, what can we do as a library, right, within the community. And it's a learning process. That's one thing that I will say, right? So as we have engaged with West Bloomfield, with Plymouth, it's starting to learn about what those behaviors and those skills look like, and then saying, how do we best bring this to the community? And usually it's finding out, where do people think that their needs most are, right? So one of the great things that we've learned with Plymouth is we've integrated it into their strategic planning process. And so they're hearing about the needs of the community at the same time as they're saying, how can we apply these skills, right? Because it really is based on needs and not just saying, let's do more work that people don't understand what it's about, right?
Yeah.
All right, great. So let us know, DJ, if there's other questions that come up from anybody. Thanks
Sounds
for the
good.
time.
Yep. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.
Yep.
Have a
good
good
day.
rest of your day.